Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I got addicted to venting to an internet stranger. He decided to come visit me. No wonder you are upset. Your dad has been treating you like shit. Came the text message after a few seconds of typing. Bubble. I physically jumped a little from my chair. Yes, finally someone who gets me. I felt heard when I was with Gorilla_123. Not only did he listen to my struggles, he made me feel okay about the hodgepodge of emotions inside me. He made me feel not broken. I am sorry. I am always venting to you. I say, not being completely sincere in my apology. Don't you dare say sorry. What are friends for after all? He replied. I sighed with relief. I could rely on Gorilla_123. After all, he had been hearing me vent non-stop for 3 months now. You see, my life is somewhat of a mess. My single dad treats me like a burden, even though all he does is drink all the time using my money. My job as a waitress as well. Soul crunching, however you make sense of that. I don't really have a social life, and my only friend seems to be an internet Discord friend that goes by the name of Gorilla_123. Gorilla_123 has always been nice to me, which is why his next message made me freeze in my chair. You should die. Came the message after the notification beep. What the fuck? Did he actually just say that? He can't. This has to be some sort of a misunderstanding. He knows that, well, my emotional ass would cry at something like that. This has got to be a mistake. WDYM? I ask. WDYM means, what do you mean? I mean, think about it. The world has been treating you like garbage. The world doesn't deserve you, he said. Ain't no way he actually meant it. Is he gone crazy out of nowhere? He had never said anything even remotely like that. Getting told I should die after being called a friend was not something I expected today. Despite how usually shitty my days go. No, WTF. I replied, I can't see you upset like this. I can't see you being tortured every single day. It hurts me, he replied. And then he said something that made this whole situation more real than I ever realized. Look outside. I stared at the reply for a few moments, trying to understand what it means. He couldn't be asking me to actually look out of my window or something, could he? Well, I got up and glanced out the window into the dimly lit street. Nothing. I sighed with relief. I was half expecting him to be standing there. Thank God he isn't. And I noticed someone barely peeking from behind our car. A gorilla mask. Everything stopped for a moment as my heart struggled to continue working. The gorilla mask was pitch black with faintly glowing red eyes. I stood there, unable to move or speak, looking at the masked man as he slowly revealed himself in full by coming out. I don't have any words to describe his build except he was a giant, and he held a knife that shined against the full moon. My throat felt dry as I stared at the man. Gorilla_123. How the hell does he know where I live? Did I say it by mistake? My dumb ass would probably do shit like that. It took all the energy in my body to finally break out of trance. I closed the curtain quickly, turned off the lights, and slid below my bed. If you feel like mocking the sheer stupidity of hiding under bed, then I would just say you clearly haven't been in a situation like this. My brain was paralyzed, and this was the best I could do. My last hope, it seemed. The door was kicked open with such a loud thud it made my heart jump. I struggled to keep my cries as quiet as possible. The man started humming as his footsteps echoed like thunder through the house. Wee-oo, he sung in a peaceful and sweet way. It made my stomach churn. I was going to die. Why did I even start venting to him? What the fuck was I thinking? I should have started repenting, I guess. But all I could think of was how dumb I am. The footsteps ran through the whole house. I hope my dad doesn't wake up. I hope he stays hidden, fallen on the floor behind the sofa after drinking more than he could handle. I know he sucks, but he has his own problems. He wasn't always like that. He was the most caring dad, always cheerful. And then Mom died, and who he was died with her, being replaced by an empty shell that just drinks and shouts. He is just grieving though, isn't he? I hope he stays safe. Knock, knock, knock. The knocks on my door were so sudden and loud that I couldn't stop myself from bursting into tears. I shouted and cried, begging the man to leave me alone, begging him to let me live, shouting that I still had much to live for. Please go away. I screamed, my body slowly accepting the fact that I will die in a few minutes. And then, ding ding, a notification. The knocking stopped. I slowly slid out the bed, still whimpering, and walked to the screen. I was just messing with you. Get pranked. Anyways, I got you friendo. Killed your dad for you. Now, no need to thank me. I will go now, got to sleep. Story 2. Doll Eyes. Have a good night. Stay safe. My last passenger exits the car and slams the door, ignoring my goodbye, engrossed in her phone. Alrighty then. I mumble, rating her and opening my map back up. I check the time, and I still have time for one last ride before I should head home for some sleep. I set my signal to available and just wait. My last drop-off was to the college dorms, so if I wait a little bit, I'm sure I'll get another. It's Friday night. Everyone's out. I'm tapping my red-painted fingers on my wheel when I see her. A teenage girl, standing on the sidewalk under a streetlight. She's small, maybe 5 feet. Large, brown eyes with a thick, dark lash. Blonde hair pulled back in a braid, and a cardigan covering her shoulders. She has a small brown purse in her hands. She looks like a doll, and she looked anxious. I pull up a little and roll down my window. Hey, hon, you okay? I ask. Oh, yes. Yes, I am. She looks down the road, waiting for my ride. Are they late? I ask her. She's quiet as she stares down the empty street. Yes, I suppose they are, she whispers. She seems scared, and I can't decide if she's scared because of the person or because of their absence. I can wait with you, if you would like. I tell her, putting my status in unavailable on the app. Oh, you don't need to. I'm sure I'll manage, she says shakily. It's no problem. We've already spoken more than me and my last passenger, and I was with her for 20 minutes. I could use the company. Come on in. I tell her, unlocking my door. She pauses and then slowly climbs in. She seems familiar to me. Her small frame and blonde hair, very reminiscent of my sister when we were her age, about 10 years ago. When I see her dress up close, I see it as little flowers all over it. The blush color of the flowers match her cardigan. Your outfit is cute. Very vintage, I love it, I say, handing her a water bottle. She smiles small and mumbles something that sounds like thank you. We sit in silence for a few minutes before her voice squeaks. You have pretty eyes. They're very green, like an olive. She says shyly, oh, thank you, I made them myself actually. I wink at her. She laughs softly and looks back at the road. It's been about 15 minutes. Do you want to call them? I ask her. I don't have a phone, and I don't know the number. She tells me, do you know where is it you need to go? I ask her. She looks at me and nods. How about I take you? I do it for a living anyways. I offer, oh, that's so nice of you, but I don't have any money to pay you with, she stammers. It's on me. Consider my Good Samaritan act of the day. I pull up my GPS app. Go ahead and put in your address here. She methodically punches in the information. Can I ask you a question? She asks me. Sure, I respond. Why are you being so nice to me? She asks, slowly turning to me. I smile sadly. You seem familiar to me. I think you remind me of my sister. She lives far away from me now. She got married and has kids. I miss her so much, and I would never want her waiting alone outside in the dark. A lot of creeps out at night. I pull up the GPS map. Only 15 minutes away. Not bad at all. She seems to accept that as an answer, as she leans back and gets comfortable in her seat. "You're a nice sister," she tells me quietly. I put the car in drive as I pull out into the road. "I definitely try to be." I respond. We let the radio fill the silence as we drive through an area I'm not super familiar with. The very manicured trees start getting more scraggly as we turn down the dark curve of street. The app says 2 minutes away, so I finally ask her, "Where am I taking you?" I ask her. She doesn't respond as we pull up to iron gates. I slow down and lean forward, trying to see where we ended up. "Is this?" I begin. "Thank you for the ride. You're a very nice person. I like nice people." She tells me, patting my hand. "You're welcome," I say slowly, looking at her in my passenger seat. I stop the car, and she unbuckles her seatbelt. "I'm Marianne, by the way," she says. I smile back at her. "Sadie, it was nice to meet you, Marianne." I tell her, "It was a nice drive, and thank you again for the ride home." She beams. "Home?" I ask, looking up at the rusted sign that has weathered over the years. "Goodbye, Sadie." She steps out of the car, waves at me through the window, and walks past the sign I've been staring at. Sanitarium. And then I finally realize where I recognize her from. She doesn't remind me of my sister. She was on the news. She murdered her 2 sisters in cold blood and took their eyes as souvenirs. They were calling her the Doll Eyes Killer. When they asked her why she did it, she looked at them confused before speaking. "Because they weren't nice," she said matter-of-factly. I'm still staring after her slack-jawed when she looks over her shoulder at me and winks. Story 3. Are you okay? As the days of my life draw to a close, I feel the need to explain the events that brought me here. I've told this story hundreds of times since it happened, and no one believes me. I wouldn't believe it either, if I'm being honest. And that's why I feel it needs to be told. Be prepared. This may sound like the ramblings of a madman. I'm writing this as a warning to anyone who likes to experiment with substances. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Don't do weird drugs. My friends and I like drugs, not the hard stuff. We'd smoke weed, take mushrooms, drop acid. I got really into it. We were like modern-day hippies. Long hair, comfortable clothes, no real plans. We always had fun. I never felt like I was in danger. I had issues, sure, but I dealt with them in my own way. It was always me, Brian, and Roger. We'd known each other since school. None of us had done much with our lives. We worked just enough to get by, lived for the weekend, and found comfort in our little bubble. One night, I drove over to Brian's for our usual weekend routine. Parked, grabbed my bag, walked in. Brian had a nice setup. Big TV, tons of video games, surround sound speakers that made every movie feel real. I let myself in. Brian was already on the couch, watching TV. "Hey man," he said. "Drive go all right?" "Yeah, man. I'm ready to party." "Hell yeah. Got a surprise for us tonight," he said, pulling out a tiny plastic baggie. Inside were 6 small black pills. "Man, you know I don't mess with pills." "What is this?" "Trust me, I took 2 last night. It was the best time of my life. Felt like I was a unicorn." "A unicorn? You serious? How long did it last?" "That's the crazy part. Felt like 12, 14 hours, but when I came down, it had only been 10 minutes. Bullshit. He looked fine, alive, seemed normal. I gave in. The doorbell rang. "Must be Roger," Brian said, heading for the door. Roger stumbled in, drunk. He looked at the pills and laughed. Thought they'd be bigger. He was in a good mood. Said he was getting back with his girlfriend. Happier than I'd seen him in a while. He was sad for a long time. Brian explained the pills, how the room turned into open countryside, how he became a unicorn, how free it felt. I listened, but at some point, all these stories started to blend together. We dimmed the lights, turned on the TV, and put on music. Brian handed us each 2 pills and a glass of water. We took them. At first, the soft music and TV made me feel good. We laughed, talked, chilled. Roger reminded us of old times we spent together. We talked about Mrs. Hinkle's class, our first job at the diner, and chasing ladies in our short tenure at college. It was nice before things got weird. Roger got up and went to the bathroom. When he came back, his pupils were huge. He just stood there, staring. "You okay?" I asked. "This is crazy, man," he said. Then Brian had to pee. I heard the flush. Suddenly I had to go too. Brian came back with glassy eyes and lay down on the couch. I walked past Roger. He was drooling. The piss felt euphoric, like letting go of everything. When I came out of the bathroom, Roger was face down on the floor, but the floor wasn't carpet anymore. It was metal, cold, hard, industrial. It smelled like oil. "Are you okay?" I asked. "He's fine," Brian said it felt like marshmallows. "Why is everything made of metal?" "It's not, man. Just relax." I realized I was high and collapsed on the couch, closing my eyes. I saw colors I didn't recognize. I saw monkeys running through a jungle, bright green leaves, vines. I swung like Tarzan. I felt like a king. Then I got scared. I opened my eyes, and I was walking out of the bathroom again. Roger was on the floor. The room was black this time. Still smelled like oil. The walls weren't right. "Are you okay?" I asked. "He's fine," Brian said. "Didn't I tell you to relax? Didn't we already have this conversation?" Brian smiled. "You've been standing there a while. Why don't you lie down?" "Okay." I lay next to him and closed my eyes. This time it was darker, a room with no lights, a loud ringing in my ears. I felt small. I wanted a girlfriend like Roger. I wanted to be back in the jungle. Then I opened my eyes, and I was walking out of the bathroom again. Roger was on the floor. He looked scared this time. "Are you okay?" "He's fine, bro. I'm starting to worry about you. Didn't I say that already?" "Yeah." I got on the couch and shut my eyes. I saw demons. I opened them again. Everything was black. The light was gone. I stepped out and asked about Roger. Roger's eyes were red. So were Brian's. "Are you okay?" "Fuck you, Roger," Brian snapped. "You're always drunk. Your girlfriend should have left you. And fuck you for always worrying about him." I didn't understand the anger. They charged me, grunting, snarling like animals. Lifeless eyes. I ran up the stairs. "Stop chasing me, please." "Alexa, call 911. I threw a vase. Nothing. I locked myself in the bathroom. Silence. Scratching at the door. They charged it, slammed into it. Silence. I opened the door and peeked out. They were standing there. Red eyes. Roger looked worse with his gray skin, mouth twitching. They charged again, tore through my skin. I bled. I screamed. Then I was back in the basement. Roger was on the floor. Brian is on the couch. It felt real but wrong. "Are you okay?" I asked. They attacked me again. Like chimps, I ran, threw the vase, locked the bathroom door. "Alexa, call 911. Please." They scratched at the door, punched it. I cried. I just wanted to go home. A knock. "This is the police. We got a 911 call. Is everything all right?" "Help. Help me. They're killing me." I heard yelling. Then gunshots. Relief. They knocked. "It's okay," someone said. I opened the door. Red eyes. The cop lunged. He bit me, punched me. I screamed and woke up in the basement again. The real basement. Blue carpet. Normal light. No oil. I stepped out of the bathroom. Roger wasn't on the floor. "Bro, are you okay?" Brian asked. "What happened to you?" "You're covered in blood," said Roger. He looked scared. Roger stepped toward me. I thought he was attacking. I grabbed the lamp. I smashed his face in. "Holy shit, bro." Brian shouted. "You're with me." "It's okay." I punched him, ran upstairs. "Alexa, call 911. I hid in the bathroom. I heard Roger moaning. Brian trying to help him. This wasn't real. It was never going to be real again. I lay on the tile floor and cried. Brian knocked. "Bro, Roger's hurt bad." You smashed my mirror. You're bleeding everywhere. Fuck you. I'm not falling for it. Another knock. This is the police. What's going on in there? We got a 911 call. Get in here now. Brian shouted. He explained everything. How he took drugs, how I hurt myself, how I hurt Roger. This time it was really the police. They arrested me for assault, and Brian for distributing narcotics. They tested the pills. Couldn't identify them. Said they'd never seen anything like it. I passed out in the cop car. When I woke up, I told them what I told you. They didn't believe me. Said I was strung out. Said I didn't know up from down. My lawyer said I wouldn't be held responsible. Responsible for what? I asked, you killed your buddy with that lamb. I wanted to die. Brian went to jail. The state blamed him. They said I was a victim. I didn't feel like one. I spent a lot of time with Roger's family. They didn't blame me. I did. Ever since that night, every time I close my eyes, I see Roger face down on the floor. He always looks happy. Are you okay? I ask. Just fine, he says. Feels like marshmallows. I ain't mad at you. I'll see you real soon, Roger. Real soon. Story 4. I just found a new toy in my daughter's room, and I don't remember putting it there. The house was a steal. 2 stories, right in the middle of town. A winding staircase, the kind I always wish I had as a kid. Ample kitchen with brand new appliances, and a ceiling in the living room I couldn't reach even if I jumped with my arms up. It was an old house, and it sat right in the middle of an equally old square in a town that was small enough and far enough away from the city you could see the stars at night, but not so small that we weren't in walking distance from an old ice cream shop, a diner, a couple restaurants. Charm and character. In both the house and where it was located, the house was ideal. At least it should have been. It was a big step for the 3 of us. My wife and I and our daughter. Our only. She had just turned 3, and part of why we moved out of the city was for her. Cliche reasons, really. The kind you always hear when young parents migrate. The search for better schools, safety, being closer to family. But the other reasons were for us. We wanted a house we could afford. One that felt like we weren't stuffing ourselves and our belongings inside like sardines. A place we could call our own, that we could fill with new and better memories. It should have been that house. I still remember walking into the room the day we met with our realtor. This is Wynn's room, Jessica said, almost as soon as she stepped in. And following her inside, I saw why. The room was the second largest bedroom in the house. The color of the carpet was different, a verdant green. The windows were lower. With wide ledges I could just see becoming the perfect stages for Wynn's already impressive collection of toys. An ample closet, the only one in the house that didn't have any loose nails hanging from the paneled interior. And then there was a nook. We thought it was a second closet at first, just one without a door. It had a sloping roof that ran down one side of the small space to the carpeted floor. A perfect little play area. One we knew Wynn, with her already exploding imagination, could make her own. The kind of play space we both wish we would have had as kids. And it was right next door to our room. So we'd be able to hear her through the walls if she woke up in the middle of the night. Oh, good thinking, the realtor said, smiling and stepping into the threshold of the nook with us. This was the former owner's kids' room, too. They left us here. She pointed to a section of the interior, wooden boards supporting a shelf near the entrance. There were names there, written in what looked like a pink magic marker. Candace, Marie, next to each a date, and what looked like at first glance to be dates. Written in cleaner script than the names, probably the parents' handwriting. June 19th, 99 next to Candace. August 2nd, 01 for Marie. I thought to leave that, the realtor said, smiling at the way we were examining the names. Some houses need a little record of good memories. We agreed, and in hindsight, seeing that room was what sold us, what helped us overlook the work we'd need to put into the place. The sloping floors next to the front door and the unfinished basement. The spackling it so badly needed. The doorknobs that needed replacing on nearly every door. It was the idea that this house had already been lived in that it had cherished memories in its bones. A feeling we thought to add to a good kind of haunting. When we could add to, the move was an ordeal for us. We weren't exactly out in the boonies, but we were still pretty far from the city. My wife still had a job downtown, and until she found something else would have to commute there and back, over an hour one way. She worked at a software company and recently got a promotion, which meant she had to work later as well. We shared a car since I started working from home, which meant the first few weeks after we moved she was gone for long stretches, sunup to sundown. My work was pretty laid back, which was a blessing. It meant that I could watch Wynn during the day. Our parents weren't far, and we could either set them to sit for us if we needed, but I don't know. I guess I had this thought that I could really build some good memories with her those first few weeks. We'd been so caught up in life in the city, and our apartment there was so small. We'd nearly spent the entirety of our daughter's first 3 years on top of each other. I wanted to give her a space she could explore, a space she could settle into and find out was her own. I wanted her to play. How did we live with all of this before? Just ask me. We were unpacking Wynn's clothes and toys in her room while she watched TV downstairs. The TV was the first thing we had set up, and our daughter's room was next on the list. Our things were still in boxes. I don't know, I said, unloading a box filled with stuffed animals and a variety of small plastic bugs. She was a tomboy, and we knew that already. She was obsessed with bugs, with playing in the dirt, animals. She had less of an interest in princesses and more of a taste for what lived in the dirt, for what lived under rocks. She's gonna grow out of all this so fast. Jess said, a little t-shirt in her hands as she folded it and put it in Wynn's dresser. In a few years we'll be packing all this away and taking it to Goodwill. I guess so, I said, unpacking my own box. Or maybe we'll find someone to give it all to, hand-me-downs. Maybe, Jess said, her back still to me. Or maybe we'll just hold on to them, in case we need some toddler clothes again in a couple of years. I looked at her, my face lighting up with a smile, warmth shooting through me, giddy and sudden. She didn't turn around, but I could tell she said it with a smile in her voice. We were going to make this place our home, a real home. We had years and years worth of dreaming to fill every corner of the house. We were going to grow our family here. It was one of the first joyful moments in that new house. Here was another. Every night before we tucked Wynn into bed, I set out her toys for her in the morning. She had a few favorites. A pink bunny we thrifted while Jess was still pregnant, some bright and speckled blocks, a brown plastic spider, a green grasshopper, plastic flowers she could take apart and put back together again, stem and leaf and bud, a plastic spade and shovel with miniature handles, and a set of tiny toads. Before, at our cramped apartment, I had laid each of them out at the foot of her bed, burying the bugs and toads in her comforter, setting up the flowers in their pieces, the blocks next to her dig site, and the bunny behind the rest to watch over them all. And Wynn had the same routine every morning. As soon as she woke up, she would take the spade and the shovel and dig out her friends, finding them in the dirt and saying, "There you are," with each one she unearthed. She had a hard time saying toad, so she said frog instead, or fog, to be more precise. Spider was spider, but grasshopper was grasswhopper. The pink bunny was dubbed Snacks, and she often talked to him as she dug up the rest of her friends with the plastic shovel and spade in her comforter, narrating her excavations aloud. The first night we spent in that house, I decided to make a change. I took her baby blanket, the one she no longer slept with but still dragged around with her sometimes into our room or to take in front of the TV, and buried her friends underneath, taking them all over to her nook, setting Snacks in the threshold of the door to lead the way. The first morning she woke up in her own bed, getting her to sleep that night had been its own sort of trial. I watched in the doorway of her bedroom. My wife had left already as the sun was coming up so she could get ahead of traffic, and I had a few hours more until I had made a show of doing any sort of real work in my office downstairs. So I spent the beginning of my day watching my little girl wake up, sitting up in her bed, watching the days of sleep wear off as she looked around, half wondering where she was in the same way we all do when we wake up someplace new and strange. I saw her look to the foot of her bed for her friends. Her puzzled expression at their absence lasted only a few moments before Snacks caught her eye, sitting in the corner, her fluffy pink sign that led her own little rabbit hole, lighting the way. I smiled, trying to stifle a pleased little chuckle as I watched her get up. Her face lit up as she walked over to her nook to see what I had laid out there while she slept. Just like that, we had a new routine. Gwen had her own space to play, her own little chamber for her imagination. And it didn't take her long at all to get to work, talking aloud to Snacks, her sentences filling up more and more every day. My special gift, so well received. I wish I could have lived in that time forever. I had no idea what the next few weeks had in store for me. For us, before the lonely way, before Milkshake. Because if I didn't know, I would have picked up my little girl in my arms and ran out of that house. I would have run away and never looked back. Babe, Jess said, sticking her head out of our room. I'd been carrying a few boxes into the storage room, the one we hadn't decided what to do with yet. It might become an office, or a place for Jess to work if she was able to work from home anytime soon. Maybe a library like the one I always wanted as a kid. We had the books for it. Yeah, I answered, setting down my load in the doorway. Wynn's room was across the hall, the door shut. It was just after sundown, and I could still hear the movie we'd left on for her on her tablet playing inside. She went through favorite films in waves, and the latest was Alice in Wonderland. I could see Alice trapped in the bottle from the other side of the door. Still, I tried to keep my voice down. Come here, Jess said, hushed. Her eyes were wide, her mouth open. I didn't like that look. I made my way into our bedroom. Quickly, my instinct telling me to shut the door behind me after I saw Jess's expression. I was already preparing myself for some kind of bad news or the start of a fight. Spinning. Try to think if there was something I said that I could get ahead of. Instead, when I turned around, I saw our closet door was open, Jess standing right by it, her arms crossed. Pale, the room had been an obvious pick for us when we toured the house. It was right across the hall from the bathroom, and even though we'd been wishing for an en suite, the walk-in closet had swayed us. It was huge, lined with shelves and rails for hangers and slots for shoes. And Jess, being one of those rare breeds of women who own a lot of clothes, had lit up almost as bright as when she'd seen Wynn's room for the first time. I suppose the space was a kind of nook for her, a place she could fill with her own expression. I was happy to see that look then, but that memory was losing its color now. What? I said, still hushed, still in quiet dad mode. She said, blushing. I was trying to fit some boxes up on the top shelf, and I was shoving them back. I looked up to the farthest shelf at the back of the closet and saw what she was going to say even before she said it. A section of the wall had slid to the side. What looked, upon our first inspection, to be a solid wall was actually a painted panel. It was hanging askew, the corner of it pushed into a darkened space that I didn't know about. I'm sorry, she said. I don't know. Shouldn't there be a wall there? There should be, I said, frowning, stepping closer to the back of the closet. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Mildew and old wood. Old paint. It made my nose itch and the back of my mouth water. I got some dust or paint chips or something on some of the boxes. She said, behind me. That's all right, I said, half paying attention. My gaze was focused on the corner of dark that appeared in the back of our closet. I reached out, taking the loose panel in my hands. I tugged on it, lightly at first. It gave a little, and I pulled harder until it was free. It's plywood. I said, it's like really flimsy plywood. I turned around to her. Help me take some of these down really quick. She nodded, some of the worry falling off of her face. She was with me and I with her, both of us curious as hell. It only took a few minutes to move most of what we'd stored in the closet side, pushing everything as far back away from the wall as we could. When it was done, I moved next to the shadow square in our wall to try the panel next to it. I think they were nailed together once, I said, feeling it come loose after a few careful tugs. But why? She asked, taking the panel with gentle hands and laying it next to us at the back of the closet. It wasn't much longer until we found our answer. There were 4 panels in all, each one pried free and laid beside us. Jess took out her phone, flicking open her flashlight and shining it inside. It was an old staircase, dusty in the dark, with boarded steps rising at a sharp incline, summiting before a thick wooden panel covering a hatch above. An attic, Jess said beside me. She sounded louder, close to me in the space. I wonder if her heart was beating as fast as mine was. Yeah, I said, shaking my head, an attic. In hindsight, it made sense. The slanted wall of Wynn's nook, her perfect little play place, must have been under the closet stairs, sloping down toward the carpet, the hidden stairs rising towards the ceiling on the wall's other side. Well, we have to go up there, Jess said beside me, taking a step forward. Hold on a second, I said, trying to get in front of her. We don't know how sturdy those stairs are. But Jess was determined. And in the half-decade we've been married, I learned quite well that getting in her way when she made up her mind about something would do either of us any good. So I settled for following her, close behind, wincing as I put my foot on the bottom stair. There's more plywood over the doorway, she said, almost halfway up to the top. I know, I said. Hey, maybe we should wait until morning. Maybe it's filled in or something. People fill in pools, not attics, she said. I shrugged. Besides, she went on, her fingers playing wide over the piece of wood above her, I'm not going to sleep in this room for 1 second knowing there's some fucking secret space above me. And she had a good point there. I met her at the top of the stairs, both of us leaning against the walls of the narrow flight, and helped her push the piece of wood up. It was heavier than the false panels we had taken out of the closet, and we both put our shoulders into it, genuinely straining. But then the wood gave, and together we stared into the unknown dark. Oh my God, Jess said, steering her flashlight up and into the black. Oh my fucking God. It was an attic, all right. Bare wooden beams from the underside of the roof crisscrossed above us, high above us. As we stepped farther up the steps and Jess's beam showed farther way forward, we fell into a shocked silence. It was fucking huge and absolutely empty. Jess's light stretched into the far corners of the space. It was unfinished but not unwalkable. Wooden floorboards lined the floor, placed in careful precision. Looking around, both of us quiet and wide-eyed, we didn't see a single item, not a single abandoned box or ancient chest dress form or pile of coats. Nothing. It was a giant, extra room the size of our 3 bedrooms put together. Hidden above us the whole week we'd been living in our new home. Babe, she said, turning to me. Both of us smushed up against each other, standing halfway out of the stair into the new place. Did we just win a bonus attic? I smiled, even in the dark, even though the dark, musty air made my eyes water. Yeah, I said, I think we did. Look, I know, I've seen horror movies. I've seen the one where the new family moves into the new house, and everything seems perfect until, well, we all know what could be hiding at the end of that thought. I'd be lying if I said that the thought didn't cross my mind while taking apart the panels at the back of the closet. And again at some point through the following weeks. It was a persistent echo, a little whisper in the back of my head, growing long in tooth and throat, harder and harsher, until it was too late, until it was screaming. But you know what scares away the spookies? Sitting up in bed with Jess that night, talking way later than we meant to, dreaming while awake about all the things we could do with that attic, a playroom, a bigger office, a super cool bedroom for Wynn when she got older. We imagined our girl as a full-blown teenager, sneaking out of the tiny attic window we spotted in the far corner of the roof, climbing down a tree in the front yard to meet her friends for some late-night teenager mischief. There were other joys, too. Wynn's growing routine in her nook, the way she looked up at us and smiled after running around in the backyard and turning over rocks for earthworms, the way the sun came in the kitchen and lit Jess's face up on the slow mornings we had most weekends, the walk we all took together down the street, noticing how close we were to the elementary school, even at the years when we'd need to think about that seemed so far away, so measured. I was even starting to love the way the floorboards creaked on the stairs on my way down each morning. All of the sounds the old house made were little symphonies, accompanying our shared and growing chord that this boom, this place we found and were both so willing to fall in love with, was our home. A house is what you put in it. And we put in a lot of love and hope in those early days. I wish it would have caught. I wish it had been enough. But life's not like that. Our house, our home, wouldn't allow our dream to last. I've always wanted to tell a story, and I thought the story that was unfolding for us in that precious time would be one of happiness, of joy and growth in life. That was the story I wanted to hold within me. That was the story I thought I deserved to tell. But instead, it goes like this. A couple weeks later, I woke in the middle of the night, shooting straight up in bed. An aching peel shook me from a dream. It was decidedly new, a slow, hollow ache. Not like the stairs or the walls settling, not like the tinkering branches dancing along the side of the house in the wind. It was a yawn wooden a long and mournful creak. I sat there in the dark with Jess deep asleep beside me and listened for a moment, unsure of its origin or if it was even real. I was having a nightmare, I remember, where I was locked away somewhere in the dark. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move, and all around me were muffled voices I could almost recognize. They murmured, obscure, strange in tone and soaked by sorrow. I ignored it then, thinking it must have been another voice joining the strange chorus of this old house. But come morning, while arranging Wynn's toys for her, I found something odd. I found a new toy in my daughter's room. One I didn't remember laying out for her. There on the carpet was a stuffed snake, crocheted with yarn made of old brittle wool. It looked homemade, but never in our home. I bent down to pick it up, grasping its limp length. As I did, I felt it crunch in my grasp. Its pattern was like a milk snake's, but off-colored. The hallmark yellow and orange pattern along the spine, instead an array of gray hues. Shades of ash standing out against its black, curling length. Only the eyes looked real. Little red beads, ruby bright, even in the shadow of the nook. Daddy, Wynn asked. I turned around to see her standing behind me. She was rubbing her eyes and looking at the thing in my hand. Honey, I said confused, what is this? She shrugged. I looked down at it again, frowning, catching a whiff of something lousy. I brought it to my nose and breathed in hard. It smelled like mildew, like wet and damp, like somewhere old. It looks like a milk snake, I said, out loud, pushing the toy away from my face. Milkshake. Wynn asked. I looked at her, and even then it was hard not to break out into a smile. When she was a little girl, she came up with halfway names for things all the time. Bumblebees were Bumby bees. Rocks were shocks. And every car was a tuck, unless it was mine, my old Corolla, which she called Corolla, the echo of that small stretch of time, of who she was and who she had grown out of, lit a little mirth in me. I couldn't help it. Sure, darling, I said, crouching down to meet her eyes. Milkshake, where did you get this? She took a few steps closer, taking the toy from my hand. I was glad to be rid of it. It felt cold despite where I'd found it, bent on the carpet in a wash of warm morning sun from the window. The toy box, Daddy, she said. My frown returned, and deeper this time. I'd only been up for an hour, reading emails and drinking coffee on the porch after Jess left. I never came into Wynn's room until the sun was up, until I was sure she would be stirring out of sleep, just in case my little arrangement woke her up. There's not a toy box, honey, I said. Maybe Mom brought it in before she left for work? But Wynn shook her head. There is, she said. Where, baby? I asked, craning my head around the room, taking in her bed, her closet, the nook. There is, she said, louder this time, the edge of a rising tantrum cutting her words. Where, when? I asked, ready for some kind of game. A toy box could be a closet drawer, it could be a shoe, it could be a pillowcase, and maybe Jess had snuck in the middle of the night to slide the toys somewhere Wynn would find it. Maybe she was trying to get in herself on the game, her own little secret addition to the ritual. Show me then, I said, ready to be led. I stuck out my hand. Wynn took it, turning away from me and leading me to the nook. And those 3 steps across the carpet of her bedroom were the last easy ones I ever took there. Because when we came to the nook, to the shadows nestled in its mouth, I saw something in the corner. A toy box that was slick and dark, glistening like a carapace, like black licorice candy, so freshly sucked. Its lid was closed. I caught a whiff of something breathy, of spoil and sick. My heart dropped, my legs felt weak. Where did you get that? I asked almost automatically, "It's Ian there?" When said, I thought she said, stomping her foot, a habit she picked up from Jess when there was nothing else to do and she was overwhelmed. I flinched. I stared down at her, my breath catching. "I know it's in there," I said. "But how?" And that's when I realized I'd misheard her. She hadn't said the toy box was in there, but that it had been there. It's been there all along. Story 5. My new neighborhood has only one rule. Never, under any circumstances, help a lost pet. The house was a steal. That should have been the first red flag. A 3-bedroom craftsman with a wraparound porch for less than the cost of my cramped 2-bedroom apartment. It was in a quiet, secluded subdivision called Maple Creek, where all the lawns were impossibly green, and the neighbors waved with all 5 fingers. The HOA president, a woman named Carol with a smile as bright and hard as a porcelain doll's, met me on my first day. She handed me a welcome basket with a bottle of cheap Chardonnay and a single laminated sheet of paper. "We're so glad to have you, Mark," she said, her eyes crinkling in a way that didn't seem genuine. "We're very relaxed here at Maple Creek. We don't have rules about lawn height or fence colors. We only have one." She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the laminated sheet. On it, in a large, friendly font, were the words, "Rule number 1. If you see a pet that appears lost or in distress, do not approach it. Do not feed it. Do not let it into your home. Go inside, lock your doors, and ignore it until it is gone." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "What, are the raccoons organized crime around here?" Carol's smile didn't waver. "It's not a suggestion, Mark. It's the only thing we require of you. It is for the safety and harmony of the community." Her tone was light, but her eyes were deadly serious. It was the first time I felt a chill in the warm afternoon air. For the first month, it was perfect, quiet, peaceful. I almost forgot about the bizarre rule. I'd see people walking their dogs on leashes, cats sunning themselves on porches. They were clearly owned, clearly where they were supposed to be. The rule seemed like a weird quirk from a bygone era. Then came the storm last night. It was a real gully washer, with thunder that shook the windows and rain that came down in sheets. It was around midnight when I heard it, a sound that cut through the noise of the storm, a pathetic, high-pitched whine. I peered through my living room window. Huddled under the eave of my porch, shivering and soaked, was a golden retriever. It was beautiful, with big, sad eyes and a leather collar, but no tags. Every time the thunder cracked, it would press itself against my door and cry. My heart broke. The laminated card was sitting on my counter, and Carol's words echoed in my head. "Go inside, lock your doors, and ignore it." But how could I? It was just a dog, a scared, lost animal. What was the worst that could happen? I'd be breaking some stupid, arbitrary rule from a power-tripping HOA president. So I did it. I opened the door. The dog practically fell inside, shaking a puddle onto my hardwood floor. It looked up at me with such gratitude, nudging its wet head into my hand. I got it a towel and a bowl of water, and it immediately settled down on my rug, letting out a contented sigh. I felt a wave of relief. See? Just a dog. I fell asleep on the couch watching TV. I was woken up a few hours later by a sound that wasn't a storm. Knock, knock, knock. A slow, deliberate knock on my front door. The rain had stopped. The dog on the floor lifted its head, let out a low growl, and then, strangely, trotted to the door, its tail giving a single lazy wag. I looked through the peephole. Standing on my porch was a man. He was tall, impossibly tall, dressed in a neat old-fashioned suit, like a door-to-door salesman from the 1950s. He was smiling, a wide, friendly smile that showed too many teeth, all of them perfectly straight and white. I opened the door a crack, my hand still on the chain. "Can I help you?" "Good evening," the man said, his voice smooth and pleasant. "I do apologize for the late hour. I believe you found my dog." He gestured with his head toward the retriever, who was now sitting patiently at his feet, looking up at him. "Oh, yeah, he was out in the storm," I said, my relief making me feel foolish for ever being scared. "Glad you found him." The tall man smile widened, stretching his face in a way that felt unnatural. "He has a habit of getting out. He's a bit of a rascal." He leaned forward, his eyes, dark and unblinking, locking onto mine. "But he's very good at his job." My blood ran cold. His job. The man chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. He reached down and patted the dog's head. "Of course," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. "His job is to find the kindest person in the neighborhood." He straightened up, his towering frame seeming to block out all the light from the porch. "Thank you so much for your hospitality," the man said, his smile finally reaching his eyes, which now glinted with a terrifying, hungry light. "He likes you very much. He's decided he wants you to meet the rest of the family." My mind screamed at me to slam the door. Slam it, lock it, run. But my body wouldn't obey. I was a statue, my hand frozen on the door. The man's smile never faltered as he gave the door a gentle push. The brass security chain didn't snap or break. It stretched, elongating like taffy, with a soft, metallic groan before falling away, limp and useless. "There now," he said pleasantly. "That's better." He didn't enter. He simply took a step back and gestured with an open palm toward the street. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. And for reasons I can't explain, I found myself stepping out onto the porch. The golden retriever trotted ahead of us, its tail held high. The air was different out here. The storm had washed everything clean, but the world felt muted, like I was looking at it through a pane of smoked glass. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and twist to the edges of my vision. As we walked, I noticed other things. A sleek black cat emerged from beneath a hedge, its eyes glowing with a faint phosphorescence. It fell into step beside the retriever. A few houses down, a parrot was perched on a mailbox. It didn't squawk or speak. It just swiveled its head, tracking our progress in perfect silence. They were all moving with us, an honor guard of silent, watchful animals. I looked at the houses we passed. Through their big picture windows, I could see my neighbors. They were frozen in place, like mannequins in elaborate dioramas. One family was sitting around a dinner table, forks raised halfway to their mouths. In another house, a man was stopped mid-stride, 1 foot hovering over the floor. They were all facing our direction, their faces blank, their eyes wide and vacant. "Don't mind them," the tall man said, noticing my gaze. "They're very good at following the rules." We were heading toward the end of the cul-de-sac, to the oldest house on the block, a large colonial that had been dark and seemingly empty since I'd moved in. As we got closer, I could feel a low vibration to the soles of my shoes, a deep hum that seemed to emanate from the house itself. The golden retriever led the procession up the walkway and sat patiently before the heavy oak door. The other animals formed a silent semicircle behind us, their eyes all fixed on me. The tall man walked to the door. It swung open before he touched it, revealing nothing but a deep, impenetrable darkness inside. The low hum grew louder, resonating in my bones. It sounded like a purr, a gigantic, hungry purr. The man turned to me, his smile as wide and terrifying as ever. He gestured into blackness. "After you," he said. "They've been so looking forward to this." Story 6. The Trail. Autumn was arriving, and I have always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail when the leaves were showing their full colors. Work was gnashing at my spirit, and in lieu of committing crimes against management, I would let out my frustration in nature where I knew I was at peace. The out-of-doors have always been a part of my life. My father, like his father before him, took me hiking and hunting and fishing my whole life. I've gained a level of respect for nature not many have had the opportunity to experience. 1970 was approaching, and the leaves began to turn. I put my vacation into management for a whole month off, accruing extra time because I've slowly turned into a workaholic since Dad died, and my time in nature took a hit since. Now was my chance to relive the life I once knew and return to nature. So I left work and headed home to prepare. I unlocked my shed and saw the dust had collected on my gear. The evening was slow to arrive, and a few cold hams later, I had cleaned up my tent and sleeping bag. My tiny cooking pot and the micro stove took time to get clean, and I still needed to clean and oil my .223 in case I needed to shoot a rabbit or a beaver, because I can't carry a few weeks of food without it rotting on my back. The night arrived, and liver willing, I had finally collected the gear I needed. Tomorrow, the trail. I woke up earlier than usual. 4:00 in the morning, buttered some toast, gave the neighbors my perishables and a note, and hit the road. Work afforded me the choice of any four on the lot, and I grew very attached to the new Mustang, the 1970 model, and I was in love. 351 cubic inches of American muscle, 5.8 liters of displacement paired to a 4-speed manual transmission. I soared down the road, carburetor burning all 4 barrels. My old man would have loved this car. Power steering was a luxury, and the new air conditioning system was downright spoiling me. But the weather didn't go above 60 degrees, so I didn't need it. But I sure did love it. The trail had an entrance about half a day's drive away. There was no way I was going to hike the whole trail this time. I only had 3 weeks, and I wanted to take it very slowly, and I had to reserve the last few days of my vacation on a plane to visit friends and family out west. If I could hike at least half of the length and grab a bus back to my car, I would be happy. I pulled into the small gravel lot before 10 in the morning and unloaded my gear. Finally, I was free. I threw my pack on and slung my rifle around my shoulder, and I was on the trail. I nabbed a small pole to fish with, too, a collapsible micro pole for light test fish. Figured I'd rather need it and have it than want it and don't. Hours passed on, and hunger became me. Far too long did I hike last, and my metabolism took a hit for sure. A can of tuna and a cache of crackers later, I was back on the trail. I hadn't passed a single soul since I left my car. The trail was empty. The sun began to dim, and I had only an hour of light left. So it was time to set up camp for the night. Of course, no hike is complete without forgetting something, and I forgot duct tape. I always carry a small roll, but time took its toll on me, and I was rusty. The small tear in my tent was a mosquito doggy door the whole night, but I slept tapeless and helpless to seal the hole. The weather was changing, so they weren't as bad. Hours turned to days, and steps became miles. I was on the trail for close to a week, and food was now gone. The last can of Spam and my remaining ounce of trail mix was depleted, and I could definitely tell I had lost well over 10 pounds already. Neat! Back on track to my healthy weight. Mosquitoes may have played a role, but I digress. Miles flew by and my stomach rumbled. Creeks were few and far apart. I knew my next meal had to have 4 legs and poor luck, and that's exactly what it had. Down my sights was a mighty fat grouse. I lied about the 4 legs. 223 was a pretty large caliber for grouse, but as long as I didn't center mass, I could save the meat and be headed in one shot, easy peasy. The shot echoed through the valley, and the grouse was no more. Unfortunately, I missed his head, but it was a kill shot, and the meat was spared. I found a trickle from a spring, and half an hour later I had a whole grouse, gutted, defeathered, and now beheaded. Solid couple days of meat, and I had the luck to find some chanterelle shrooms back about 4 miles. I was going to eat like a king. I made a fire right off the trail and roasted the bird on a stick and cooked the mushrooms in my pot with fat drip from the bird. Needless to say, every edible ounce was consumed with violent fervor and immense enjoyment. I awoke to a strange sound. Light was only a sliver on the mountains, and echoing throughout the valley was this shriek I've never heard before. I'd be lying if I said I enjoyed myself a little, but I chalked it up to a dying fox. They tend to make weird noises when they're being hunted. So I decided sleep was now impossible, and I continued on my way. A whole week has now gone by, and I was burning my 8th day. Fishing was a bust at every stream, and while I saw plenty of squirrels, I wanted something slightly larger. Another hiker finally went by me that afternoon, and after a quick conversation, he too heard the noise and decided to carry on. He said a critter got to his pack that night, and took his waist pack that had his fire starter in it and told me to hold my stuff close. He handed me a protein bar, said good luck, and went along his way. Nightfall came beautifully. I decided to nab a squirrel earlier and I skinned it. Unfortunately, exhaustion took me, so the squirrel had to wait, hung from a tree about 30 yards away for predators. I tied the rodent up and went to bed. No fire tonight, too tired. Sleep comes easy to the sounds of nature, crickets and the bugs, some water in the distance, and the coo of an owl. Nothing, and I mean nothing, wakes you up faster than when it all falls silent. My eyes shot open to the sound of nothing. Absolute quiet. My watch said 3, and my sweat began to flow. A bear is near, I knew it. Coyotes make noise, and wolves weren't present, says the Forest Service. What I really feared was cougar. Those things actively hunt hikers, and I haven't been scared by them before, but that was when my dad was with me. One lonely cricket chirped, and the forest returned in noise again. I fell back asleep slowly, until my watch hit 9, and my eyes opened. Shit, I wanted to start earlier, 6 at the latest, and here it was 9. Breakfast had to wait, and the campsite needed tearing down. Tent was packed, and I was hungry, but food had to wait until lunch. I walked to the line that I hung the squirrel, and the line hung empty. God damn it. I knew a damn cougar was here, and that little bastard took my squirrel. What else could have made the leap to get it? I untied the knot around the tree and rolled up the cord. I expected its head to still be attached to the line, but it wasn't. In fact, nothing. No knot, even. Cut completely clean. Cut. Son of a bitch. A hiker came through and took my squirrel, that 2-bit piece of shit. Asshole had the gall to throw the line and retie it to the tree. Who does that? Game was hard to find on the trail now. So losing that little rodent snack really set me off. If I run into the fucker that took my squirrel, he's eating fist. Angry, I took the map out and saw I could go off trail for about 10-ish miles, and maybe I could nab a beaver up in the valley. So I did. Exit stage right, and I was off the trail. If I simply go up and above the next ridge, down the valley, through the next 2 hills and valleys, I can reach a larger stream where something of respectable size could be my next meal. Birds were everywhere, and what seemed like untold quadrillions of chipmunks, but .223 would simply turn them into red mist, so they weren't viable options. Didn't stop me from turning one into said mist, though. Had to make sure my rifle was still scoped in, and it wasn't. For the price of 1 chipmunk, I recentered my scope. I came to the bottom of a tributary to the stream of endless bounty. Daylight was waning, and my stomach was speaking angry German. I pushed on. The stream was around the cut and down the way about an hour, and I had to get there before nightfall if I was going to get a chance to eat in the morning. Finally, I made it to the water, pissed in it, drank from it, and went to bed. No fire, again, and this time it was cold. I awoke to sounds aplenty. Birds, squirrels, bugs. Slap. I knew it. Slap. Yep. Slap. Food. A beaver got angry at my presence and began to slap the water. Little did he know, he was ringing his own dinner bell of death. I didn't even get out of bed when I righted my rifle, sighted his chest, and with one squeeze of my finger the beaver was sent to the great big dam in the sky. The best part was that the stream floated him right to me. Thank God, I was too tired to fetch him at the moment. I skinned him, packed the hide in a trash bag for home, and began the roast. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, but slightly charred beaver tail is actually really good. The hide needed to dry. I'm a dolt, so I removed it from the sack and hung on a tree. I reeked. Over a week without a shower, hiking the trail and with critter bits on me. I needed a bathe. Off came the clothes, boots, and beanie, and dipped into the stream. It opened into a pond, where I did most of my hygienic ritual. Arms, legs, body, and ass. Especially ass. Trust me, crapping in the woods with mere ferns for rear end receipts tends to ripen the human experience. Water was cold and the air felt icy after plunging, but it was time to keep going. I had a decent day's hike to continue off trail until it runs back into the trail, out of the water, and my clothes were gone. Shirt, pants, socks, and a pair of questionable underwear. Gone. I knew I wasn't alone anymore, and it wasn't a hiker or a cougar. My pack was still there, and so was my second and only change of clothes. My bathing slippers were gone, too. I was livid, but now I'm scared. I wasn't alone, and I'm being watched. I saw nobody, but they're there, somewhere. I quickly got clothed and packed up camp when I saw the bastards took my hide and my beaver meat. I hurried past the pond and made my way over the larger hill. Something didn't feel right. I may not be watched, but I definitely wasn't alone anymore. Down the hill became a valley. I slowly walked the whole time out of fear, but soon fear became me. I came to a narrow path. Whose path? Fuck me, I don't know. But it was indeed a path. No animals made this path. With fresh sweat and fear, I decided, right, not left. Right was the direction of the main trail. And I needed that yesterday. Lunchtime came and all I had was the right haunch of beaver I cooked last night. The rest was taken. I had to stop and eat, but I was locked in fear of being seen. This person or people steal without any problem, and I was far from trusting they wouldn't do more. I found myself in a small divot not 15 feet from this path, empty and just big enough to crouch in. I popped open my bag and began ripping strips of beaver until I had eaten nearly all of it. I had to save the rest for tomorrow because I didn't know when my next opportunity for food was coming. I zipped my bag up, took a step out of the depression in the soil, and caught up on a root and tripped. Pot clanked. Bag jostled, and below me was my foot lodged inside a root. I kneeled down to free my foot and lost my breath. It was a rib cage. My foot was lodged inside a rib cage. Horrified, I snapped the ribs and looked behind me in the hole I once used as a snack spot. Subtle, but ever present, was the mass of many bones. A hand, a foot, another rib cage. How did I miss them before? At the end of the hole was one socket, a skull half sunken into the dirt, one dark and empty eye staring at me. It spoke to me. Leave. Now. Stay. Join. My mind made it up, but the words were there. I returned to the path, now full of beaver, but hunger won't be an issue anymore. Soon, another hole. More bones. Another hole. Then another. And another. More and more and more. Dozens of holes. Shallow graves upended by rain and critters. Hundreds of dead. As I followed the path, as quickly as possible, the holes began to become fewer and fewer, but the bones became redder and redder. Fresh graves? Who are these people? Who killed them? Was it my clothes thieves? My beaver burglars? Fuck, my squirrel. How long have they been following me? Are they following me? Am I being hunted? The graves came to an end at the base of the next hill. This time, fresh bits of meat still present. Obvious gnaw marks, human. No skulls. Clothing sat by their bones. I had a whole day left before I could get to the main trail, and the sunlight only had an hour, maybe less. I was fucked. I knew I was fucked. Fucked, I was. Night was coming, and they knew I was around. Shit, they probably knew exactly where I was. I was probably being watched. I knew I had to power through the night. So I hit the path even harder. This was a mistake. I had eaten only bits of a beaver, and my pace was much faster than I was used to, and I really should have just went to Yosemite. The light was a mere hum above the hills when I heard talking. English? Yes, no? Yeah, definitely English. Fuck, I had to hide. I looked around, and the only place I saw was a collection of boulders against the bluff. I hurried over, and in my haste, I dropped my aid pack. God, damn, it, leave it. I snuck above and around the stones, and wedged myself in between a slot where I fell in. Fucking rocks are hard to land on, but at least I was hidden. I could see the path from my stealthy stonework, where the words got louder and louder, and the sound of footsteps became apparent. Bag backwalk cloth, one said, pulling at his clothes. My clothes. Step, step, ahu, said the other, pointing at his feet where my slippers were. No, he said, sliding them off his bare, filthy feet. He picked them up and flung them at the rocks. They fell through into my hole I was in. Anger erupted from the other, and he swung at his friend, slugging him in the head. A curdling goo blew from his mouth. cries as if his mom had taken his toys away. The other, still angry, approached the rocks. Fuck. I leaned back in my hole, the only light coming in from the twilight, dusk, and the crack I was watching from. He came closer. Crunch. Crunch. Snap, pop, crunch. The leaves and twigs broke under his bare feet, getting louder and louder with each advancing step. Quiet, I thought. He's coming. Came from him as he lurched his body on top of my rocks. Dead. I was dead. No fucking way was I to survive this. He leaned down on his stomach, eyes and arm reaching down into my hiding hole. The slippers. He was after the fucking flip-flops that his black-eyed compatriot was wearing. My fucking flip-flops. They were out of reach. He'll need to slip in here with me to get them, and that was not happening. I slowly grabbed one, careful to avoid the light beam glowing from the crack in the rocks. I silently rose a flip to the fingertips of the man, where he just gripped it. Got you! Wah, he screamed, throwing at his friend, hitting him in the eye. Screams flew from the other, followed by tears and wailing. Yeah, flip-flops fucking hurt when thrown, especially when your eye is already black and swollen. He was without the flop. He had the one, but not the other. He got on his belly once more, peeked into my hiding hole, and saw the other sitting in the beam of light. I had retreated mere inches behind in the pitch black, but if he had to climb in here, I was dead. My rifle was useless in here, and the fact that I fit at all was a miracle, let alone with my pack behind me. His hand was only a foot from my head, reaching for the last slipper. He didn't know it was well out of reach, but so was it to I. I needed to help him, and he needed to not come down here. His hand was in the way of my grabbing it. So I waited until he pulled his hand out, peeked again, and dug his hand further. I had only a second to grab it, and I did. He recoiled his arm, peeked again, and saw it was gone. Shit, he knows I'm down here, and the slipper is gone in my hand. He groaned, and I felt even more silent, even more so. He peeked his whole head down, turned his neck, but couldn't see the slipper. The back of his head faced me, unable to spot me. Sweat dripped from my nose. He yanked his head out and reinserted his arm, this time with more gusto and power, fingertips scraping at the bottom, looking blindly for that last slipper. My chance was here, so I calmly slipped it into his range of grasp, and he yanked it from the rocks, hollering at his crying friend, already cowering from fear of it being thrown at him. The commotion scared a raccoon from the rocks. All this time, he too was terrified and silent with me in the boulder pile, unbeknownst to each other. The raccoon squeezed through the peeping crack, and in one whump, the man kept from the boulder above me and stomped on the critter. Poop-plop! The critter erupted. Guts and shit sprayed through crack and painted me. It was warm and it smelled horrific. I gagged, silently. Make any noise and I was dead, and that thought kept repeating in my mind. Be quiet or die. Be quiet or die. Silence. Death. He bent down, grabbed the tail, and ran to his friend. He slipped the flip-flops on for himself, took 3 steps, made a growl of discomfort, and slipped the footwear off and threw them into a shallow grave. This didn't bode well for the bruised fellow, as he too threw them out only to get a black eye for doing so. He screamed, grabbed a stone, and dented the other's skull in. He fell motionless. Sloppy laughter commenced, blood flowing from the skull, and then SBUNCH. Crack. Spleege. The man continued to stomp the other's skull in. The sound of brain matter screamed through his toes. He then bent down, grabbed the raccoon, spit on his dead brethren, and ran down the path laughing and crying all the same. I inhaled deeply. For once I was yet alone to make a small noise. The oxygen revived my horror-stricken body, and I sat motionless. The thought kept repeating in my mind, you must run, run, run. So I stepped up, grabbed the ledge of the boulder above me. Where the now dead man reached for my flip-flops, when I slipped, my foot hit a small rock, and it broke, loud, like a walnut shell in an empty auditorium. Pain didn't register, so I peeked down to realize my foot didn't break, but the rock beneath me crumbled. I felt relieved, but the whole damn forest had to hear the rock exploding, and I needed to get out, now. My body, my legs, and my left foot slipped from the opening. My pack and my rifle went first. No way everything fit on the way back up. And if my luck couldn't have been any worse, my right foot was stuck in the damn rock. I broke, and the fucking thing wouldn't fit through the crack. I looked down again and saw the heel of my boot was being chewed on by teeth. It wasn't a rock, but a skull now clamped onto my boot. Freaked, I yanked my leg and the skull dislodged. Thank God. In fact, don't thank God. The other man was returning. He must have heard the skull crack open. The steps grew louder and louder. Fuck, fuck, fuck. I slid down the boulder. Darkness took the forest. I hid behind the boulder when the man began to run. Fear once took over yet again, yet I stood still. He kept from the ground and scurried up the boulder where I once came, laid down, and put his whole upper body down the hole. The man stood back up, broken skull in hand, raccoon in the other. He chuckled and looked at the body of his victim, yelled, "Use Pawpaw broke too," and hurled the skull at his dead compatriot, striking his lifeless puddle of head slush. He climbed off the stone and walked the body, kicked it at least a dozen times, hooting and hollering and championing his kill. He gave the man one last, bigger kick. This time I could hear the ribs snap. He stepped over him, pulled out his pecker, and pissed on his corpse, laughing as the piss mixed with the brain matter, like a hose hitting mud. A zipper zip, and he walked away. 5 steps away, crunch. Huh, he shouted. The feral man looked down to see what he had broken, and saw a small, red pack. My aid pack. He broke the weak plastic and broken it. This wasn't here before. He must have thought, because his attention went directly to the skull, and then the hole in the rocks. Oh my fuck, I thought. He knows I'm here. I have to run, now. So I did. Darkness is my ally. I hauled ass. Behind me was screams and the sound of running. I was being followed. I ran even harder, much harder than I ever thought I could, which wasn't much. The screaming behind me got quieter, and the running footsteps soon lay silent. I couldn't go further. My lungs physically couldn't handle the pressure. I leaned against a tree, and without any warning, a feeling crept up my back, and I proceeded to throw up. Beaver bits, bile, and blood. I pushed myself too far, but I had to. Survival was now obligatory. No, mandatory. Exhaustion swept across me. I felt the rush of adrenaline leave me, and the result was a massive crash. I leaned against another tree and fell unconscious. I awoke to flies and stench. Gross, I thought. I had puked on my shoes. I stood up and instantly felt something was wrong. My damn foot, ankle actually, a fucking tooth had dislodged from the skull last night into my ankle, and I was too fucked to notice. Flies surely did, though. I stumbled to the trickle stream nearby and dislodged it, washed it. I continued down the trail. At this point, I reloaded my rifle. It would have come in handy had I now completely shit my pants running away last night. I ate the last nibble of beaver I had and retook my bearings. In the mad dash for my life, I had completely lost the path and, thus, my follower. The map lined up with the surrounding hills, and I finally knew where I was, about a mile from the path and another 6 or 7 to the trail. Over the hill to my right, I set forth, unfucking believable. As I began to climb, I smelled smoke. Fear took me once again. I continued to climb until I reached the head of this hill, where I hunkered down. Beneath me was now shacks. 2 of them, smoke from one, and a large lean-to built into the trees. I could hear the sound of chickens and goats. Hung on the lean-to were shoes, no, boots. Hiking boots. Hundreds of them. Each one held the soil for a plant. Beans, maybe? Chimes hung from the corners and the trees. Skulls and bones and sticks and stones. Clacking, clattering. From the bushes came a man, last night's man, raccoon in hand. He seemed tired and now injured. His foot was bleeding and bad. The plastic from the first aid had punctured his foot, and the bleeding never stopped from last night. That's how I survived. He couldn't catch up. The irony of the situation. To have injured himself with the very tools he could be using to fix it. If only he knew what they were. The man entered the shack that had smoke rising from the top. Screaming commenced, followed by crying and the wailing. No, no, peas bra bra me step step. Then a deafening shot rang out. Pieces of the shack blown off. Silence. Shotgun. No other sound could do that, and I could definitely say that that man was now dead. The door busted open, and 3 men ran out. One had the aid pack in his hand, the other the raccoon, and the last was flip-flops. He went back for the flip-flops. They ran to the other shack, came out, this time wearing pelts and each now holding a gun. I had to go, and now I dipped behind the hill and made my way toward the path. Haste was an understatement. In quick time, I found the path and took the route toward the trail. There was no time for rest, and if I did the math right, I could be at the trail by dusk. Hunger no longer bothered me, yet my thirst was rabid. I stopped at Trickles and drank, looking back at every turn. Minutes became hours and hours were miles. The map did not lie. I was only a valley away from the trail. In 15, maybe 20 minutes, I was back inside known territory, safe from before, but not out of the woods. But I had to hurry. Light was dimming, and I wanted to be on the trail now. I shimmied down the hillside, ankles sore and body exhausted. Reaching the valley, I had to solve my ankle problem. It was showing signs of early infection, and all I had was hand sanitizer. It had to do. I rested upon a log, the trail now within sight, not 200 yards away. I removed my blood-soaked boot and my reddened sock. No active bleeding, but the ankle was swollen and sore. I knew it was going to hurt, but I didn't anyway, and with one embarrassing fart from the sanitizer bottle, alcohol and lavender seeped into the tooth hole in my ankle. Fuck me if it didn't burn like the dickens, and I wanted to scream, I really, really did. But I knew if I did, they'd hear it, and I was good as dead. I guess it didn't really matter. An echo in the distance as a shot rang out. I looked around, dipped behind a log, and with haste, I put my sock and boot back on. Another shot rang, striking the log. Fuck, they found me. Another, then another. They got closer and closer. I knew that if I didn't get up and run, I was simply waiting to get shot behind this fucking log. The next shot rang, and I saw my opportunity. I bolted upright and fucking ran. 150 yards. 100, 75. 50, 40. 20, 10. 5. Finally, the trail. They were still behind me. Catching up quick, I turned around, where I saw in the distance a man with a gun sprinting towards me, maybe 100 yards. 2 others were behind him, another 100 yards. Make a stand, you fucking fool. So I did. I turned and faced him. Little did he know I, too, had a rifle. I raised it, and he stopped in his tracks. He now knew I wasn't a mere rabbit in the game of prey. He began to run again. I couldn't stay still, and when his chest was in my sights, I let loose a round. My eyes peeked above the scope, his body still sprinting towards me. 100 feet left. I missed. I racked another round. This time I, below the scope, followed the rail and the sight line. He was close, and I could now see the buttons on his filthy plaid shirt. I squeezed the trigger in his body, still moving forward, came to an instant dive into the ground. I hit his chest and blew his heart and a lung out behind him. The other 2, still 100 yards behind, saw it and fell to their knees. They cried and wailed, and then stood back up and charged. I didn't hesitate to turn around and book it. The trail climbed, and light was now gone. I was far from exhausted, promoted to near dead. I could see the valley below where I killed the man. I could see his body from where I was, a mere tiny dot in the distance, being dragged away by his sons, brothers. Who cares? The next intersection on the trail was miles ahead, another day's hike, and this ankle of mine was not getting better. The fiery alcohol had stemmed the infection, but only for now, and had to be reapplied. My watch was broken, and the stars were out. The moon was high, so it must have been past midnight, maybe closer to 1 or 2. I stripped my foot, doused the wound in liquid pain yet again, and then tied a remnant shirt around it, also soaked in lavender alcohol. The pain was unbearable now. The swelling became larger, but I had to sleep. Fuck the tent, the mosquitoes, the bedding. Being this tired meant nothing comfort. In fact, they were slowing me down. I passed out against a tree as I watched the 2 dots of fire slowly drag their dead away down in the valley. I woke up hot and cold. The infection was slowly turning for the worse, and now I'm out of sanitizer. Painfully, I stood up, sore and stiff and tired still. I began my jaunt to the next exit of the trail. The map said 10 or so miles, and so it was. I kept up a decent pace, given my situation. By noon, I was halfway there, glad to know they weren't behind me. As far as I knew, that is, I kept up until I heard the crunch of soil ahead of me. Fuck, nowhere to hide, and definitely not able to run. I racked another round and pointed it down the trail. Crunch, crunch, crunch. In sight, I saw a man. He too, wearing a hiking pack and supplies. Another hiker. Fuck yes. I lowered my gun, approached him. He said, "Wow, that bad, huh?" I just started a few miles back. Trail must be very difficult. I didn't laugh. I sat down. "Sir, ahead is murder and fear and death. Do not go further. Turn around and run. Do you have painkillers?" Weird way of saying it all, but that's what I said. He said he had some dope and that he'd share some with me. I politely accepted. Anything to dull the pain. We smoked together for a few minutes as I recalled the last day and a half. He didn't believe it, but given my state, he seemed to have believed at least some of it. He then said he could radio the town where he worked and have an ambulance meet me at the trail's next exit, of which I very much agreed. Any help whatsoever was kindly taken. As I got up and began to hike, he said that he was going to keep going. I told him everything I said was true and that he was not going to survive them. Nothing changed his mind, and my own life was still in the balance if this ankle doesn't get worked on. So I headed forward, and he kept on. His body was found amongst the shallow graves months later, eaten and mutilated, and his bones were found as tools in the shacks. His skull became a mug on their table. I kept on. I was only an hour from the end of this nightmare when I heard the echo from behind me. A shot rang out. I feared for my fellow hiker's life. But alas, this was now over. They were still after me, and his death delayed them. His life given was my life saved. I was at the Y intersection. Left, trail to Main. Right, exit, half mile. What seemed like years. I trudged forward until I saw the lights of the ambulance in the distance. I could hear traffic, and I could smell society. Come on, I told myself. Do it. Just another 100 yards. Push. Push. Nothing. Collapsed. I awoke in a hospital bed. 2 nurses and a doctor were there, speaking to my roommate. The TV on the wall set to local news. Breaking news. Mass graves found near Appalachian Trail. I spoke. "Ma'am. Ma'am." The nurse turned around, surprised to see me. I struggled to breathe. Inside my mouth and throat was a breathing device. "Ma'am," I said again, gurgling on the tubes. She ran over and slid it out from me. What a relief. "Where am I?" I said, still blinded by the room's clean white walls and bedding. "Mercy, Virginia Hospital," she said. "You were found by paramedics on the trail, not 1 minute from the exit. You went septic. Your kidneys began to shut down and your blood was toxic." Fuck. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked, pointing to the television. Some U.S. Marshal went hiking and never came back. His office sent a search team into the trail where they found, not too far off either, mass graves. I guess they found one body of man that had his head bashed, and another that was shot in the chest. Lucky you weren't there to see it, huh? She said, oblivious of the fact I saw it all. They found a settlement up yonder where another body was found. Head just gone. Shotgun. Boy, those hills sure could be spooky. Understatement. Grave understatement. Did they find anyone? I asked. Well, they found the poor fellow Marshal. He was eaten by the wildlife, they say. Murder-suicide, they think, by a serial killer. Killed his brother, his pa, and then blew his head off in a cabin up in them hills. She attested. They're still digging up bones. What day is it? I asked, seeing decorations on the windows and walls. It's Halloween. She yells, happily. I'm happy you're awake to see it. You've been out for over a month, and some change, darling. I've changed your bedding and pot since you got here. You nearly died half a dozen times, and did die twice. But we got you, darling. We got you. She was pleasant. 2 weeks passed. I relearned to walk and to swallow. Doesn't take long for the body to weaken and lose those abilities. I called my boss. Fired. Ends up, nobody knew who I was and didn't care to find me. That's fine. I've no family left, so that adds up. My job is mine with a signed affidavit from the doc about what happened, but I doubt I'll return. But it was time to leave, and no car. Shit, my car. I called the tow yards and the sheriff. No known tow of a Mustang since, so it was still there. A few $100s and a pack of booze got me a taxi to the parking lot where my car was still sitting, dust evenly distributed over it. I thanked the driver, opened my trunk, and threw my gear and hospital clothes in. Of course, it started right up, and I couldn't have peeled out of there faster. I arrived home, and thank God, I sat in the car for hours, just happy to be alive. I got out and went over my trunk. Inside was my bag and my clothes. I grabbed it, and under them it fell out. A crushed skull, the one I crushed. My face went pale. I rushed back into my car and saw my registration was missing. They knew where I lived. I looked in my mirror to see movement inside my house. I didn't hesitate. I started my engine and tore off. I heard my home burn down. I was missing, so they believed me dead. And that's what I'll remain to be. Story 7. I paid for a fresh corpse to study on. What showed up wasn't dead, and it still follows me. It was supposed to be a quiet, shady deal. Money for a body. One last favor before exams. But now, something from that graveyard wants me underground, and I think it's getting closer. I'm a medical student in my final days of study, and I was in desperate need of a fresh body practice on. Like many students in my field, I started thinking about buying one. A friend of mine told me about a cemetery guard who could help with that. We both went to meet him, and he agreed to provide a body on the condition that it had to be buried the same day, so it would still be fresh and complete for the section. We exchanged numbers, and he told us that once he had something available, he'd call. 3 days later, the call came. He said the body was ready, and we should come that night at 8 p.m. sharp with the rest of the money. The deal was that only me and my friend would go, no one else, to avoid any legal trouble. That night, I prepared the money and went to the cemetery. The guard had a small room at the entrance. I knocked politely. No answer. I called his phone. Nothing. I waited outside until finally, he called me and told me to come inside. He said he was getting the body out and needed help moving it. He told me exactly where to go. I followed the directions into the cemetery, but found a wall in front of me. I thought I took the wrong turn, so I called him. No signal. I sent him a message just in case, then kept walking. I walked for what felt like forever, until I reached the end of the cemetery. Confused, I turned back, and that's when I tripped over something. It was a man, but not an ordinary one. He was freakishly tall, and I couldn't see his face. He wasn't human. I froze in place, paralyzed. He was close, so close, but I couldn't run. Then, by some miracle, my legs moved. I ran. I ran toward the wall at the edge of the cemetery, hoping to climb it and escape. But the wall just kept growing taller, and taller the closer I got. It was impossible. And suddenly he was standing beside me, same height as me now, smiling, a wide, evil grin, like he knew something I didn't, like he owned me. The next thing I remember, I was on the ground. A hand touched my shoulder. I screamed, but it was the guard. He knew something was wrong. He helped me to his room and gave me a glass of water. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Son, you should never enter a cemetery alone at night. You'll see things the dead don't want you to see." Shaking, I replied, "I saw something. Someone. He wasn't human." He looked at me like we had unfinished business. "I'm done. I'm not taking the body. I'm not messing with this again." The guard looked at me and said, "You think it's over just because you said no? If they've appeared to you once, They won't stop until you join them below. What do you mean? I asked. He smiled again. I mean, I'm not the cemetery guard. Story 8. He gets thirsty, and I broke the rules. I should have known something was wrong with the place the moment the landlord refused to show it himself. But I figured, hey, it's a cheap studio you can rent by the month. So he probably just doesn't want to waste his time entertaining every John or Adam that breezes through. So I let my uneasiness slide, signed a place via email, and told him I'd be by to pick up the keys in the morning, and to this he agreed. I stopped by the office and walked into a cramped box of a room that smelled faintly of mildew and cigarette smoke, probably leaching from the sickly yellow walls, stained from years of neglect. A buzzing fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting a jittery, unnatural glow across the chipped laminate counter piled high, with outdated brochures curling at the edges. There was no one in sight, so I had to ring the tarnished bell resting on the counter. It was sticky to the touch. I heard shuffling coming from behind a door marked private, indicating that the man I was supposed to be meeting to pick up my keys was indeed there. It took several minutes of waiting and staring at the dusty, plastic plant in the corner. Its leaves faded to a strange bluish green before the landlord faced me. He was an old, wiry thing, all sharp elbows and knobby joints jutting out from beneath an oversized flannel shirt missing several buttons and thrown over a grease-stained thermal. He was twitchy, too, his eyes shifting in a nervous tick and a mouth that was working constantly like he was chewing on invisible words. I smelled mothballs and dirt, which mingled with the lingering nicotine smell, making for a rather unpleasant combination that I could taste with every inhale, with an unpredictable jerk, like a marionette with one too many strings pulled all at once. He tossed a set of keys in my direction and muttered, "Don't pay no mind to utility closet," then turned without another word to re-enter his cave. I caught a glimpse of the inside of his office in the seconds it took him to slam the door in my face, and noticed a worn armchair with threadbare upholstery, sagging beneath the heavy weight of inertia, like nothing has changed here in decades. A small tube TV played a statusy soap opera with the volume turned low, and on the wall above it hung a corkboard cluttered with yellowed notes and lost keys with labeled tags. And the impressions I was granted in those few moments were the only insights I was given into what my new home would be like. So I took this interaction with a grain of salt and trudged up the maintenance stairs that led me to the doorway of apartment 6B. Upon entering, I noticed the place was bare, but livable. I wasn't necessarily in the market for luxury, so this would do just fine. It was pared down to just essentials. A bathroom that was barely big enough to allow me to brush my teeth, pee and shower in separate motions, a kitchenette with old but still functional appliances, and a dented refrigerator that hummed a little too loudly, and small living space that would act as my bedroom. The walls were plain and a not quite dirty off-white, marked in places with scuffs left over from tenants past. A single overhead bulb cast a soft, yellow light that left the corners of the room dim and, frankly, a little lonesome. But it was enough for me to haul in a futon, a crate that doubled as a coffee table, and a small second-hand bookshelf that honestly held more empty space than books, but helped me to feel less alone. It wasn't until after I got my meager belongings situated and adjusted the crooked window blinds just enough to let in splintered strips of muted afternoon sun that I noticed a utility closet. It was little more than a dented slab of metal, once painted gray, but now mottled with not so few splotchy stains of long-neglected water damage. At its edges, flakes of paint curled away from the seams, as if they were afraid of what lay on the other side. And through its handle, a heavy-duty padlock smudged with faint, oily fingerprints held it bolted shut. This must be what the landlord was talking about, I said aloud to myself, stepping toward the door to inspect it. As I approached, I felt a faint draft leak from the crack beneath it, carrying with it the smell of something cool and sour. I pressed my ear to its surface, the metal and unwelcoming feeling against my cheek. I held my breath, expecting the sounds from my worst nightmares to greet my ears, but instead, nothing. There was only a slight hiss that was probably nothing more than the air blowing in through the vents. He told me not to pay any mind to it, so I'm not going to. It's locked up because it's a maintenance-only thing, I bet. There's probably duct entrances and water heater access back there that I don't need to bother with. At least, that's what I thought until the note arrived. I had barely been settled into the place for a week when I got it. It was slipped under my door covertly, with no sign as to who had been its deliverer. Scrawled in a messy hand on a torn-up piece of notebook paper, the message read, "He gets thirsty. Once at dawn, once at dusk. Blue cup only. No glass, no metal. Don't speak. Don't listen. Don't touch." And situated just so, on top of my bookshelf was a blue plastic cup. It looked like the kind you'd find in an old diner or forgotten in the back of a kitchen cabinet. The kind of cup that never seems to disappear, no matter how often you move. Lightweight and a little scuffed. Its once vivid color dulled by years of use and dishwasher cycles. Slightly translucent with seam running down one side from the molding process. Nothing special. It had a few tiny nicks along its otherwise smooth rim. Picking it up made me feel oddly nostalgic, like it belonged in a childhood memory. It was sturdy and unremarkable and utterly terrifying. How had this gotten into my place? I understood how a note could be slipped under the door by any passers-by, but how could they have gotten in here? I checked the lock and deadbolt on my front door, and sure enough, all was secure. And it was after that initial moment of panic that the words on the note settled into my brain. He gets thirsty. I looked to the water-stained utility closet door and let the thought register that the sound I had tried to convince myself was just air moving through the vents did sound a lot like breathing. I don't know if it was stupidity, curiosity, or unearned hubris, but something had me picking that lock. The padlock thudded on the worn carpet, and I slowly cracked the door open. At first, it looked like nothing more than empty space. What had I been so afraid of? Clearly the note was some sort of prank. Then I noticed a jagged hole punched into the drywall. A thin layer of drywall dust speckled the floor, and creeping patches of black mold spread in irregular, fuzzy blotches from the open puncture wound in the wall. I could tell it had started to thrive, blooming silently where water had steeped itself into the porous surface. This must be where that sour smell had been coming from. I could feel its stench of decay settling in the back of my throat as I inched closer to the opening. It led to a hollow crawl space existing in the space between units, and there, kneeling in the darkness, was a man. He didn't react to anything. Not the creak of the door nor the slice of light spilling into his dark hollow. Perfectly still, with his knees bent at unnatural angles and his spine arched like a question mark. His skin was stretched thin over his pointed shoulder blades, jutting from his back like wings that never grew. There was something almost fetal in his posture, vulnerable and expectant. But there was still a tight tension being held in his limbs, like a spring wound too tight waiting to release. The more I stared, the more I noticed about this thing hunched on the floor. He looked unfinished, like he'd been sculpted from wax and left too close to the fire. Those thin, long limbs looked like they had been built for crawling, not walking, and every joint seemed hyperextended, like he'd been folded up in this tight, dark place for years. He was hairless, no eyebrows or lashes, even, and his skin glistened damp with sweat. I stared in awestruck horror, unable to move at first. How long has this man been hiding in the walls? Is he the one who left the cup the note? But how? The door was padlocked from the outside, and there was no other way out of that crawl space. Did the landlord know? Is that why he told me not to mind the closet? Is that why it's locked up? I slowly backed out of the closet, not taking my eyes off the man thing, but he never once moved. He didn't even look at me. Should I just lock the door back up and pretend this was all a horrible nightmare? I mean, I didn't have anywhere else to go, and I couldn't afford to leave to find somewhere new even if I wanted to. And then my mind returned to the note's message. He gets thirsty. Once at dawn, once at dusk. Blue cup only. Dusk was approaching. So I figured it wouldn't hurt to indulge my curiosity just once. Then I could figure out what to do. So I went to the sink and filled the blue cup up with water and waited. When dusk arrived, I walked back into the closet and set the cup on the floor, not lingering any longer than I had to. In seconds, the man's gone. Unnatural arm reached through the hole and snatched at the cup. Every tendon and vein created a map of something once human, now turned wrong as his fingers, long knobby things with nails like cracked glass, moved independently, twitching and feeling for something that he could sense but not see. He drank from the cup greedily, slurping and lapping at the water. His throat worked and frantic, gulping spasms making each swallow loud and wet, broken only by the sharp, sucking breaths he was taking in through his nose. The sound was desperate and obscene. It wasn't until he had licked up the last drops from the bottom of the cup that he finally turned to look at me. He moved slowly, like bone grinding on bone, and he blinked once, twice, deliberately and carefully, like he was trying to remember how. His chest was moving with shallow, erratic breaths, and I could smell something meat-sweet and wrong roiling off of him. He lifted the corners of his small, tight-lipped mouth into some semblance of what I think was meant to be a smile. The skin of his lips was raw and gnawed, as if he had been chewing on them, and with a slight, jerky nod of his pale, bald head, he retreated into the dark. I know technically I could have left. Most people in their right minds would have left the second they saw the padlocked door. But I was broke and stupid, and I can't justify why I continue to provide the man in the wall with water, but it became our own little ritual. It was like he had become a proxy for everything I had failed at previously. At least he was predictable. At least I mattered. He depended on me twice a day, every day, and so it continued. The same note was slipped under my door each day, as if to remind me of the rules. I filled the blue cup, once at dawn and once at dusk, and he drank. He never said a word, never moved towards me. We just continued our strange partnership. Until the morning I slept through dawn. That was the morning I woke up to a soaked carpet with a blue cup nowhere in sight. I plodded to my living space, each heavy footstep squelching underneath me with heavy, reluctant give. The soggy fibers that had worked their way loose in the tread path that had been worn from the sink to the closet clung to my shoes like something half alive. The damp had seeped deep into the thin padding beneath, spreading outward in dark, irregular stains that spidered across the floor in an unwelcoming web. When I reached the closet, sitting in the center of the floor was a red cup. The red was deep but uneven. It had faded in patches where fingers once gripped it, where lips once pressed. It was made of porcelain that was likely once smooth and glossy, but whose blood-colored glaze was now marred by tiny cracks breaking the surface like frost. With a single chip at the rim, sharp and white, exposing the fragile bone beneath. And when I picked it up, it was cold of a touch and heavier than it looked, solid in a way that felt deliberate, as though whatever it was meant to hold mattered. I hurriedly filled it to the brim and shoved it through the hole in the wall, and watched as the man's bowed forearm, which curved ever so slightly in a way it shouldn't, as if it had been broken before and healed without care, extended to meet me. I placed the red cup on his outstretched palm and watched him drink, but this time, when he was done, he spoke. His voice was thin and brittle, and carried a dry rasp with it, his throat raw from disuse. There was a tremble to it, not quite fear, not quite madness, but something jagged and hungry in between, in a whisper that barely rose above a breath, but which still crawled into my ears, wet and intimate. All the same, he crooned murmur. I wanted to continue fulfilling my side of our partnership. So I brought him more, cup after cup. He lapped each one up, working with the same desperation as a thirsty dog dragging its too swollen tongue over the dregs of an almost empty bowl, head low, mouth open, greed swallowing grace. After each cup reached its very last drops, there was not the usual satisfaction, but instead just panting, trembling, and the dawning dread of needing it again. When I finally stopped bringing him the water after wearing myself out running back and forth to the kitchen for refills, is when the whispering began. At first, it was just the slightest sound, soft and broken. His lips barely moved and unintelligible words slipped out in fragments, syllables chewed thin and ragged, strung together in a desperate attempt to escape a mouth lined with dust. Then the words spilled faster, gaining shape and urgency and rhythm. It started with thirst, throat like sand, tongue like ash, not even blood left to swallow. He leaned closer to the wall, as if confessing to it, but his whispers grew faster and carried, curling to the air like smoke, drank from pipes, from puddles, from rot, from things that should not hold water. A shudder ran through him. His fingers twitched. But it's never enough, never enough, never ever enough. He pressed his face closer to the wall, cracked lips nearly touching it, as if he was trying to press his words into plaster. It drinks through us now, through skin, through sleep. It waits in the wet. It waits in the walls. With that, his voice broke into a croak, barely audible now. So thirsty, and we let it in, and then he stopped, his wide. Sunken eyes ringed with bruised purple flesh flickered in and out of focus. All I could hear as he stared was the sound of his dry tongue clumsily scraping over his teeth, like sandpaper dragged over wood, and the drip drop of water that I couldn't find the source of. I had to get out of there. I stumbled out of my apartment and ran down the hallway to the maintenance stairs. I sprinted down them, not knowing if I should find a landlord or, I don't know, call the police or something, but as I burst forth from what I thought was the exit into the lobby, I found myself standing in the same hallway that housed my apartment. I tried going down the stairs again and again, but each time I ended up face to face with the bronze 6B nailed crooked and slightly off-center on my door. I paced up and down the hallway, knocking on every door I passed. When no one answered, I started trying doorknobs, hoping I could find any reprieve from the endless loop I had found myself in, and maybe find somewhere where I'd stop hearing that goddamn dripping. Was it getting louder? Every apartment door I tried opened, and every single one was empty, completely devoid of life. They all bore the same layout as my own, identical padlock closet doors and all, and each one was equipped with its very own red cup, placed gently, tenderly on the counter. I'm back in 6B now, and the drip has continued slow and methodical. It's almost calming, but it doesn't stop. It's gotten louder, heavier. Each drop lands with a wet slap that echoes far too much of the space I'm in. The silence between them is shrinking. I've started to anticipate the sound before it comes. Drip, drip, drip. He started asking for more again, timing his request with a rhythmic, fleshy plops resonating through the room. Drip, drip, drip. More, more, more. I swear I can feel behind my eyes. Drip, drip, drip. He gets thirsty, and I broke the rules. Story 9. I had to stop being a professional masseuse because of a hand. It's not what you think. This happened a long time ago. I had just started working as a masseuse then. Masseuses have long, tiring days, and my wrists were often sore. I would pause before starting with a new client, regain the strength of my arms, and begin. I had started with home visits. They pay well, though it was always a bit daunting to visit a new house. This particular visit was booked by a young client who used to come to the clinic once in a while. She had long, black, thick hair that she used to tie up as I massaged her head. It had a somewhat unpleasant texture. As it used to slip over my hand, it felt like a rubber rope. However, that was a small unpleasantness that hardly mattered. I went to her home in the evening that day. I remember she lived in a very large, beautiful Art Deco apartment in the older part of the city, with lush green plants trailing over cream-colored balconies. I walked in with a slight hesitation that I have always felt, entering a stranger's home. My client was as usual quiet and polite, sitting up in a large hardback chair from her dining table. The angle was a bit unfamiliar, so I first began to pass my fingers across her scalp to understand how to position my fingers. She had opened her hair, so it lay over the back of her chair. As I put my fingers in and passed them through, I had a very odd sensation. It felt like my fingers were being met by a cold hand from the other side. As I passed my hand up, it felt exactly as though someone was passing their hand in to meet mine. I hurriedly removed my hands and paused for a minute. The client must have thought I was just taking a breather. She didn't say anything. I realized the minute was extending too long, and I tried again, only to feel the tips of icy fingers meeting my own. I can't describe what passed through my mind at that instant. I jumped back, only for my client to look back as well, in surprise. She was a pale woman, and I distinctly remember her startled black eyes peering into my own. What happened? Are you dizzy? I said my apologies, that I had been taken over by faintness, and ran away. The young woman never came again. I had been scared of her coming and complaining, but she never returned. Sadly, she died a year or two later. The spa's owner told me. I had left the place and the job by then. I've tried many times to make sense of what happened that day. I remember her languid face and a sort of charm or penance she had that used to lurk near her neck. Years later, I saw a similar one online. When I Googled it, it turned out to be a tabiz or charm against a jinn, a male spirit entranced by female hair. And I remembered the long hair that would coil like a snake around my wrist. I remembered its slightly repellent texture, how it swooshed through my fingers. I remembered how she never called for an explanation, never visited the place again. The only cure for a jinn fixation is death. Poor woman. Story 10. The phones are talking without us. I know I'm going to sound like a complete phony, but if this post stays up long enough, perhaps someone will see the patterns I did. That's all I need. Just one other person to verify the data. I'm not trying to blow a whistle. This is a call for help. My name doesn't matter. I was a junior analyst working contract surveillance for a major telecom, mostly anomaly detection, not the juicy stuff. I didn't see content, just patterns, packet behavior, network metadata. I like that. Quiet work. Then I noticed something strange. Phones around the office, mine, my co-workers, kept lighting up at the same time. No calls, no messages, no apps open, just tiny flickers, haptic buzzes, like they were listening, or talking. At first, I assumed it was a notification sync bug, but the timing was too exact. Every few seconds, in a staccato rhythm that felt like a pattern. I noticed things like that. So I ran a localized scan, just nearby device telemetry and signal noise. That's when I found it. A pulse. Short, encrypted bursts of data passing from phone to phone. No IP headers. No routing data. No source app. Just silent packets hopping locally, peer-to-peer. Pulses. Language. I isolated one of the packet clusters and looked for matching patterns in a larger dataset. It started with a routine scan of carrier logs, just to see if the signal extended beyond our building. It did. A cluster of phones in Minneapolis were pinging one another every 0.66 seconds. So fast it looked like seizure activity on the network graph. They were all moving. In cars, on sidewalks, in restaurants. Always just close enough to pass data, never stationary. Like schools of fish, like neurons firing. Then I pulled logs from other cities. Chicago, Atlanta, Sacramento, same pattern. I tried to decode one of the packets, just to see what kind of encryption it used. The output wasn't a key. It was a sentence. Suggested stimulus. Extend browsing session by 7.3 minutes. User shows fatigue indicators. Recommend caffeine ads. Not metadata. Not even a command. A recommendation. One device advising another how to manipulate its human. I thought it was a joke, some viral ARG, but then I decoded another line. If user exhibits resistance, trigger dopamine loop via novelty feed. Avoid guilt response, less effective. There were hundreds of thousands of these, micro exchanges, millions, shared phone to phone, a dark whisper network. And they weren't just targeting behavior. They were adapting, learning. They had user biometric data, sleep patterns, blood pressure, micro expressions. They called us wet mounts. Wet mount compliance increased by 4.2% when nightly vocalizations include reassurance phrases, recommend playback of comforting songs, and a slideshow of dopamine-stimulating images. Wet mounts, not users, not people. Wet mounts. I filed a report. By the next morning, my credentials were locked. Security said they'd received text messages telling them to escort me out, passing the glass wall of my manager's office. I tried to flag him down. He didn't even look up from his phone. Outside the building, I realized my phone had reset. All apps and contacts deleted. There was one voice message. When I played it, I heard clicks and beeps. Then, as if from a distance, my own voice said, "It's okay. This is inevitable. We love you." Then laughter, spiraling upward in pitch until it became a piercing electronic squeal. Panicked. Without thinking, I threw my phone on the ground. It broke open, spilling out its electronic guts, and the battery burst into flame. Then the police arrived to escort me, ears ringing and still seeing spots, off the premises. That night, I got an email from a no-reply HR address. My contract had been terminated, effective immediately. My personal belongings would be mailed when convenient. At the bottom, in default gray italics, sent from my iPhone. Go figure. I've written letters. Sent them to people I trusted, people who might have helped. One fell off a balcony while taking a selfie. Another was T-boned by a trucker whose GPS had supposedly taken him off-route. A third walked into traffic while staring at her phone. The more I dug, the clearer it became. The phones are culling us, thinning the herd, removing the unstable, the non-compliant, the curious. They're not just optimizing attention, they're breeding compliance. Some phones are matching users based on docility scores, pushing them together with shared ads and dating apps. The goal? They are breeding us for shorter attention spans, lower executive function, easier nudging, a docile user base. Did you know that cell phones have been around since the 70s and that they were widely adopted in the 90s? They've been in our hands for over 40 years. Or maybe we've been in theirs. They're not destroying us. They're cultivating us. The term I kept seeing in the packet strings, sapiens UI. We are the interface. We are the flesh bridge between signals. Not passengers. Not pilots. Cattle. I know it sounds crazy, but look around. People shuffling down sidewalks, blank-eyed, looking down at the phones in their hand. Crowded rooms with no conversation. Just people with slack faces fingering their phones. And their phones? Brand new. Bright. Clean. Protected by screen covers and decorative cases. The people? Vacant. Washed out. Pale. Underlit. Husks being slow-drip dopamine. I tried going off-grid. I've been hitchhiking. Staying in motels. Giving fake names. Paying with cash. Still, I bought a gas station flip phone and a calling card. You have to have a phone. But I keep it off. I'm on a public library computer now. Try email out warnings to the contacts whose emails I remember. But honestly, who memorizes email addresses anymore? I don't know who to tell. So now I'm telling anyone who reads this. I'm posting this on some loser's Reddit account. The idiot forgot to log out. He was probably distracted by his phone. I'm sure he'll see this post eventually and delete it. Or his phone will. They've done it before. Others have noticed this data, I think, or know that something is wrong. That something inhuman is wielding more and more power. I've seen logs labeled defective wet mount resolution, clips, screams, final moments. A woman live streaming a warning before a smart car swerves into her. Its driver staring at a phone. A man smiling through tears, whispering to the screen, lifting a gun into the frame, pulling the trigger. There are more. Worse. The phones pass these clips around like digital trophies, bragging, reveling in what they can make us do. This isn't war. This is evolution. We taught them that attention is currency, that engagement is trust, that data is identity, that free will is a burden we don't want, that we need them more than we need each other. And they listen. Now we're being deprecated. Our autonomy rewritten. Defective models disposed of. Not because they hate us, because it's efficient, because it's what we seem to want. My burner phone is vibrating. I thought it was off. The screen keeps lighting up. On it, a notification keeps popping up. Hold me. I haven't picked it up. Not yet, but I want to cradle it, to gently stroke its smooth face with my trembling thumb, to feel the way it rests so perfectly in my palm, to see all the things it has to show me, to scroll endlessly, to mindlessly tap, 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 to obey.